Welcome to Watercolours with Caroline. And this is the last one in the series that we've been doing, which has been line and wash this spring and beautiful. So lesson number 8 is Smugglers Cottage, and it is a real place, a bed and breakfast in Dorset in the UK, where I stayed with my children and my mum, and we had a beautiful time there. Beautiful, beautiful old cottage with a thatched roof. So join me. Do the drawing in pen and ink. If you just pause the video on the drawing at the beginning, you can maybe copy or trace if you want to. If you take my class, then of course you have all the drawings and the details. So welcome, get ready to paint, and let's go.
So the photo had a lot of trees in the background. I think it had a great big chimney up here, which I just left out. I left out a lot of the trees, but if you want to put them in, like these great big oak trees and stuff back here, feel free to put them in if you want to, especially if your sky goes a bit weird. On my first one, I did try to do kind of like, it was August when we went there, but in England, the sky is often a bit grey, a bit overcast. We don't get the bright blue skies as much there. So I kind of tried to go for that muted sky. I'm not sure I like it. I think with this one I'm going to try today, I'm going to go for just a nice cobalt blue sky that, you know, sort of complements the what do you call it, thatch roof, the thatch roof, beautiful thatched roof, the very thick, like this cutout here has been cut out after the thatch has been done so that the window has light. And if you look at the photograph, the thatch is probably a foot thick through here and through here where they've cut through. They didn't cut through these two. I guess maybe they thought that would make the front of the thatch really, really weak. But very beautiful. There's a little design that they put in the top thatch. I can't quite see what it is, but it looks like there's a lot of sort of X's in it, and I've just kind of done some little lines and some little X's. It's the same just around the thatch, around the door. So I just put a few little lines to show that, and just a few lines to indicate the thatch. So I've made a few changes, just left a few things out that are a bit tricky, and really just made this bush here had so many leaves. I actually missed that the side of the building here was white. I didn't remember to leave that, but it doesn't really matter. And I was just putting a little bit of extra detail in afterwards. So we're going to do the sky first on dry paper, and I'm just going to use Cobalt Blue this time, a nice wash of Cobalt Blue and a biggish brush, and we'll just try and get the sky on pretty quickly. When we do this bush here, I just went straight, you know, green into wet sky and let it bleed a little bit around the edges, because you can firm up the edge with your pen, and you can firm up the edge later with your pen if you want to. So we don't need to do too much drying here, especially as we'll stop after putting the cobalt on the sky. We'll stop and mix up the green, and by that time the sky will be drying and the green will just blend, should just blend fairly nicely. So here we go. Here's my let's move it down a bit so we can see the sky. And I better keep my pictures close by so I have them in front of me. And we want a good wash of Cobalt Blue and a nice big, I think a number 10 brush. Now let's just put that over my painting for a moment. Let's get my tray and let's get some cobalt going for the sky. And you may decide that you would prefer a lovely cerulean for the sky. I mean, you can do any color sky that we've experienced throughout this series, or sometimes even a really watered down ultramarine can make a nice sky. But I think cobalt's a lovely, gentle, bright blue. Let's just test that. Yeah, so we don't want it too overpowering, not too thick. Nice transparent wash, but some good blue paint, and you want quite a bit. Remember, it needs to move around. You don't want a little dry patch. I'll show you what I sometimes see as a mix. It's hard for me to do because I'm so used to doing a nice big wet mix. So what I see sometimes when people are getting their wash ready is a little puddle like this is very dry. It dries up in a few seconds. It's not really mobile enough to make a nice sky or liquid enough. So let's move that back. Big number 10 brush. And I'm going to get that on quickly, but kind of carefully because I don't want to go over the roof in any way. So I can be quick when I'm at the edge. I got a hair in it there. I hate that. I protect everything so carefully. And then still a hair turns up. Little tiny, oh, I did go over the roof. As I come down to these leaves here, I'm just going to push my brush down into them a little bit like that. And I'll use my Kleenex in a minute to just clean up that bit on the roof that I went over by accident. I'm always careful when I'm chatting. I get a little bit blasé, I guess, with my paintbrush. Need to slow down, calm down, and just take it easy. Now, as I come around the top of this bush here too, same thing. I'm just going to cut in a little bit around that, not with a straight line, just with a, you know, a sort of a wiggly line. Go in a little bit, and especially here too. Go in a little bit there. And then I need to be very, very careful not to touch it because I can get some little backgrounds and bubbles. What I am annoyed with is this little hair here. So I've got a fairly dry brush and I'm going to try and just pull that little hair up. There's another one there. I'll take that up when it's dry. But it's so important once you've put a wash down, don't go back over it. Don't add more paint. You'll just get big bubbles of paint or big backgrounds and so forth. And that's why you need to have your mix pretty liquid. Even where I've gone over the top of the roof here, I should be able to get the roof color over that okay. And then we'll just let that soak in. I'll let you do yours, and then we're going to mix up some greens for the bushes and so forth while we can work on all of the rest of this while the sky is drying. I think that's a much nicer sky than my kind of like grey sky that was true to what was happening that day, but not very attractive. We can do better than that. So we can use the blue that we've got there, add a little bit of ultramarine and a little bit of yellow to make a lovely green for the bushes in the background. Now these bushes back here are quite dark and quite blue. There's actually two different bushes. There's the big bush behind the house, and then there's a greener, I think ivy or something on the front of the house here. So we want to sort of delineate between the two of them a little bit. And when you're ready, I'm going to move this because I can't put paper towel over the top. I will smudge it. So I have lots of cobalt on my palette. I can add some ultramarine to that to make that darker green for the bush in the background and right over on the left. And then I'm going to add a little bit of Azo Yellow to that. Now I don't want it too green. That one in the background is quite a blue green. I'm going to add the yellow carefully, a little bit at a time. It does make your yellow a bit messy. I'm always having to clean mine up, but if I do the yellow first, I just find that I don't get it blue enough. So what I want to make next to that is a slightly brighter green for the ivy, and then we're going to have to use an even brighter green for the rest of it, but we'll just do the other one for now. So I will start with yellow this time because I want a brighter green for the ivy. and it keeps my yellow cleaner. And a little bit of ultramarine to that. And we're just, it's good to mix them side by side so you can see that one is, see, I soon get too much blue in it. A little bit more yellow again. Go back and forth until you get a green that's slightly brighter. We're still not into the bright green that you'll see in the other bushes. So I'll pop that over here. Let you mix up your greens. And like I said, it doesn't matter if your sky's still a little bit damp. We'll just get a little bit of, I'll show you now. We're going to get just probably just a little bit of flooding of the green into the blue sky, but that doesn't matter. My brush is full of the dark green, blue green. I'm going to just pop that on while you mix. I'm doing my brush in little bubbly swirly motions. Careful on the side of the roof, because like I said, I want that to be a very different color. And then I'm going to go around that lighter ivy. It also doesn't matter if you have, in this line and wash style, if you have little breaks of white in your painting. They're actually rather lovely. They're kind of like breathing space. I add a little bit more ultramarine blue as I go down closer to the base of the bush, a little bit more because it's quite dark at the base. And of course I'm going to go around those plant pots. And it is fairly straight at the bottom. There's a path that it joins at the bottom there. I just dipped my brush in a bit more ultramarine as I came down. It looks very dark on camera. It won't be that dark when it dries. I'm going to suck a little bit up just in the center. It looks very blue on camera too. It's not quite that blue in real life as I'm seeing it. And you can see I've got a little bit of bleed at the top here. Doesn't matter. I kind of like that. And while you're mixing up your paints and you're doing that, I'm just going to wait for it to dry a little bit before I put the slightly lighter green ivy on. It's not that much lighter, it's just slightly lighter. Mine's a little bit too thick, I think. It's adding a little bit more water. I'm not going really close to the other one at the moment. Just holding back. Remember, there's a basket of flowers there too. Suck a little bit of paint from the top where the sun's hitting it. There wasn't much sun that day. We don't have a lot of sun going on. And again, my brush strokes are kind of circular and a little bit sort of bubbly, because that is what the leaves look like. There's some geraniums or something in pots down here that I want to avoid. I'm going to grab a little bit more of that blue-green, because as we go behind the pots here, it gets quite dark. I'm just grabbing a bit of blue-green. There is actually, sticking out in front of this pot, quite a light green plant, so I'm going to leave that. And now I can get a little bit closer to that other wash. And I think you can probably see on camera the subtle difference between one is just a little bit more yellow than the other one, just very slight difference. And the top of this one is actually catching the light too, so if you wanted, you could always lift a little bit of the top if you wanted. I don't think it's necessary. It's line and wash. We're being pretty sort of loose with everything. But what we will do next is the bright grass here and the bright grass here. Very, very bright, sort of bright like the side bush. So we can do any kind of a mix for that that's got lots of yellow. I use Quinacridone Gold and Cobalt Blue, but you can use Sap Green and Bright Yellow. You can use Azo Yellow and Cobalt Blue, just lots of yellow compared to what you had before. So let's move that away again and get my yellow tray. And I'll mix a couple of those bright yellows to show you the difference. We'll start this time. I'm going to start with the Quinacridone Gold one first. So I'm going to use the Quinacridone Gold and then add a tiny bit of Cobalt Blue to it. Not too much, because I want it nice and bright, a little bit more gold. Or I can use, I'm going to use my Azo Yellow and a little bit of Cobalt or Ultramarine. That makes a lovely, lovely bright green too. Lots of yellow. I can use my Azo Yellow and a little bit of Sap Green. That makes an absolutely gorgeous bright green. Might like to use that one, especially for the one that's closer to you, and then I maybe use the other one for further away. And I'm also going to try my Indian Yellow with, I'm going to try that with some Phthalo Green. That makes that really, really bright green. And what you want is a contrast between your darker greens and your lighter greens. So there's 4 combinations. This one was Quinacridone Gold with Cobalt. This one was Azo Yellow with Cobalt. This one was Azo Yellow with Sap Green. And this was Indian Yellow with Phthalo Green. So you've got a few. And you'd be surprised how much yellow you need, because it will read dark green in no time at all. So you choose, or mix a bunch of different ones up, because when we do the bush on the side, you can have the really light green at the top. And then if you see on the side here, really, really light green at the top, and then you can get darker as you come down. So you can use different greens as you come down, but this has to be, as you can see, much lighter than the ivy behind it. I'll just on it. And all of these work for grass. They're all fine. And if you look at the grass, it's quite patchy. It's sort of very light in some places and sort of got bluey green patches in others. So it doesn't matter if your paint turns out patchy. That's fine. And it's not a very big area. I think my number 8 brush will do me fine. So for the closest one here, I'm going to use the brightest one, which was the Indian Yellow and the Phthalo Green. I want to go really eye-catchingly bright. This piece of paper was slightly wider than my other piece of paper. Now the grass is patchy, so I'm going to take a little bit of blue-green, just a little bit, and I'm going to just, while this is wet, just going to add a little tiny bit. I'm just on the tip of my brush. Just adding a little tiny bit of that blue-green just in there, especially in the corner. You know how I love to darken up the corners a little bit, just to get that kind of patchy look. And then the grass that's further away, I will use the Azo Yellow with the Cobalt Blue, a little bit more blue, and a little bit of, and I'm also grabbing a little bit of the one that has Quinacridone Gold in it. And I have to kind of look at where it comes here. There's a darker part to the building. at the bottom, you know, kind of like a foundation part. Now I'm looking around. I don't think, apart from the bush at the side, that should do us for a nice bright green grass. Actually, again, I'm going to take a little bit of the blue green and add it wet in wet, especially under this rose. I think it's a rose bush over here, whatever it is. A little bit of shadow, a little bit more blue close to the building. And later we can add a little bit more shadow under the rose bush. Now what you can see is we've got bright green under that laurel bush or whatever's at the side. So when we come down to the bottom of that, in contrast to the light green grass, we're going to have to make the bottom much darker, but the tops are going to be much brighter. So we're going to kind of work our way down with light at the top coming to dark at the bottom. We won't worry about that yet, just pointing that out. And let's mix up some nice reds. I think we have to have some bright red geraniums in there. So cadmium red, or you can use scarlet or pyrrole red, or even I have a little bit of vermilion here. Vermilion, the very orangey red. And I really do love cadmium red. You can buy the cadmium-free cadmium reds now. I don't have one, but they are available from some Winsor & Newton and Daniel Smith, I think. I also want some Quinacridone Rose, called Permanent Rose by Winsor & Newton, for some of the flowers that are more pink. If I want them very light pink like the roses on the rose bush, I'm just going to add some water to lighten up that pink. So we've got the pinks. There's some lilac-y colour ones near the window on the right. So let's move this up a little bit. I can mix the Quinacridone Rose with the tiniest bit of Cobalt Blue. Just to get a very pinky violet. We don't want it, well, I mean, you can choose whatever you want for your flowers. I'm just making that a little bit violet. There's some blue flowers, so I'm using Cobalt Blue with it. I'm going to put a little touch of Phthalo Blue with it to brighten it up. Because cobalt's very gentle and we have a cobalt sky, and the Phthalo Blue mixed with it, it's just going to make it a little bit brighter for, I think, the hanging lobelia that's there. And there's some white flowers too. So we don't want to go like more than that, I don't think, but we've got a nice variety of flower colours. And a little tiny brush. Take my paper towel off, and depending on whether you're right or left-handed, start over on the side that you're not going to smudge. So I can see that this hanging basket up here has some pink flowers in it, so I'm going to go into my Quinacridone Rose, and there's also some white flowers. I'm going to just dot with my paintbrush at the top of this basket. And then I'm going into my sort of lilac color, and there's some little lilac flowers just down here. Probably just, I have no idea, maybe a lilac lobelia, who cares? Doesn't matter. I'm just going to put some little dots of color. And again, I'm still going with my Quinacridone Rose for the next basket. And there's some white flowers in that basket too, so leaving a little bit of white paper. And there's a couple just close to the roof here. Very pale pink, those ones. In the planters down on the ground, there's obviously some bright red geraniums. So again, I'm going to use some bright red. Some under behind here, just poking out. They're a little bit more muted in the photo, and we can always mute them later with a little glaze of blue or green. There's some in this planter. They're just circles and dots that I'm doing. If you want to make them more shapely, you can use your pen to give them more shape. Let's zoom in a bit more. I can hear, if Carolyn's there, she's saying, oh, please zoom in a little bit more. Now I'm going to add a bit more water to the pink because there's, I think it's either a rose bush or a peony here. Doesn't matter which. They're big light pink flowers. So I've just diluted the Quinacridone Rose a bit to lighten it up. And I'm going to use that lilac-y colour for some in the window box here. Little tiny dots. And again, if you leave white spaces between, that's great. Going into my rose colour for a few. And a little bit of red. We need to leave a little bit of space for green. The ones in here are white. Don't know what I did for my, oh, here it is. I just left those white. And I'm going to do a little bit more red on this side of the basket, on the top right window. Some pink in the middle. There's white at the top and white hanging down. And there looks to be like a bit of orange on the left side. I'm going to use my vermilion for that because it's a very orangey red. I might add a little bit of transparent orange. Just for a change of colour. If you have other pinks and colours that you love, just use them. This is a great time to use whatever you would like to use. Now, I don't know if I've added on your drawing the flowers that were just here. It's very fuzzy. It looks like it could be a petunia of some sort. It's very, very fuzzy. I did add them in on this one. And then I think I may have left them out on the drawing as being a little bit too much. Totally up to you whether you put them in or not. I decided in the end to put them in on this one, thinking I needed a little bit of pink to break up the foreground. Oh, I have some rose door, or doré or door. And I'm going to just... No, I have some rose madder. It's a little bit softer. I'm going to use that maybe for these. Doesn't look that much difference to the Quinacridone Rose actually. just just splodges, really just splodges. We don't need to get too technical. Oh, and then there's the blue, the Lobelia, which I completely forgot about in my excitement. There's some hanging down here. There's quite a bit in this planter here. I'm actually going to put a little bit more pink, no, maybe the violet in this planter. That there isn't much in it that you can see, but I think I'm going to put a little bit of the pinky violet in there to add a bit more. Also on here I can see, looking closer, that there's a little bit of violet, maybe Lobelia hanging down here too. Taking a little bit more violet, a little darker. I just added a little bit of blue, a little bit more definition over here. And then we don't want to go overboard with that. We need to... there's a couple of things I didn't add to my first one, but there is in a couple of the windows some light showing. And I'm thinking, if I take a nice bright yellow, I'm going to put that little bit of light in the window. I think I need a gamboge actually. I'm going to get an orangey yellow gamboge. Just put a little bit of light in this window. You don't have to, but I'm just noticing it and thinking maybe I will add that before I do all the dark in the window. That was just a little bit of gamboge. Other colours that would be good would be Quinacridone Gold or yellow mixed with your orange. Just a nice glow for those areas. I'm just going to pull back a little bit. I'll let you get your flowers in, and then I think we'll do the path before we do the roof, because the roof is kind of a big commitment in colour. In the photo, the roof and the path look a very, very similar grey colour. And what I wanted to do with the painting was lift the colour of the roof to a more thatch colour, a more yellow ochre straw colour. Now the straw on this roof has got a lot of green growing on it. It's probably faded in the sunlight. So it probably was a bit more grey, but I just wanted to give it more oomph, make it look like nice new straw coloured thatch. So it'll be different from the grey path to the more yellow ochre thatch. And of course, if the sun had been shining on this, it would have probably been a much warmer thatch, would have been much warmer than it appears in the photo. I'm running, oh no, I'm not running out of mixing space. I think I'm good. I don't think I need my pinks and reds anymore, so I could clean those up while you're painting. And just get rid of those. Give me a bit more space. Wash my brushes. Switch out my water. I've got plenty clean water here. You know what? I'm thinking. No, I'm thinking about why I did things in a certain order. I did the thatch, and then I did the path, and then the chimneys, and then I did the greenery. Now there's a reason I probably did that. The greenery is going to be right next to the thatch here. So if I do the thatch after the path, the greenery is going to bleed into the thatch. So I'm going to change my mind here on the fly and go by my notes, because that's what I did. I did the thatch next, and then the path, and then the chimneys, and then the greenery, so that the thatch won't bleed into the greenery. So we're going to work on the thatch next. I've changed my mind. We won't work on the path. I should just listen to myself and do what I tell myself to do and not try and go off piece. Here we go. Right. How are you doing? You ready to do a little bit of thatch roof? So we need some thatch color. So there's several colors you could use. You could use yellow ochre, lovely color. Let's put some yellow ochre down. I'm in trouble getting mine wet enough. There we go. So yellow ochre is a really good thatch color. You can use any of the raw siennas. There's many different varieties. I've got, this is a traditional raw sienna. And then I got raw sienna light, a bit more yellow. And if you don't have any of those colors at all, you could use your burnt umber with yellow mixed in. Won't be as good, but you can still make, or burnt sienna with yellow mixed in. See, if I mix yellow in with burnt umber or burnt sienna, I can make that kind of yellow ochre color. I'm going to do both. This is the burnt sienna, that's the burnt umber. Mix it in with some bright yellow. And I'm going to get something close to yellow ochre or raw sienna. Now we need two colors. There's some sort of shadows in the thatch. So to get those shadows in the thatch, I've mixed ultramarine blue and burnt umber, or you can mix cobalt blue and burnt umber, just so you can have a little bit of shading. Not too much, you don't want too much shading. So I've got some burnt umber here. Let's make a space. So let's put some ultramarine blue in there, or cobalt blue, either one. It just makes a sort of a grey, and some burnt umber, or you can have burnt sienna. Either one will be okay. And you're just going to mix a sort of a grey brown color. You don't need too much of it. It's just for those odd little, let's bring my other painting back, just for those little shadows. And we can put them on a little bit while it's wet, and then a little bit more when it's dry with some dry brush. So you don't need a lot. It's just a little bit of shadow. So mix yourself up some, you know, either some yellow ochre or some raw sienna, or that kind of a color of straw, you know, some color of straw, and have those ready for your roof. Number 8 brush, I think, will be a good one. And I'm going to get my raw sienna or my yellow ochre, whichever one you want to use. And again, start over on the side you're not going to smudge. And just fill in your roof. I don't like where I went over the edge of that at the top there. I'm using all three colors that I mixed up. I'm just dipping into the raw sienna, the yellow ochre, the raw sienna light. Make sure you've got enough wash mixed up. Just go around those leaves. We're going to put the dark under the roof, either with pen or with dark paint later. So don't worry about that. And take my smaller brush, I've got my number 2 brush, and I'm going to get a little bit of that brown color that I made, and just going to add a little bit of shadow coming sort of, I'm going to like downward strokes. You don't want too many of them, sort of coming down like this, a little bit around here at that edge there, come down, and don't overdo this part. Just going to go inside here a little bit. You can put more shadow on later. Again, I'm going to come down this side a little bit. It's just to kind of take the edge off of that yellow straw color. You'll notice as you get close to the edge of the roof, it's darker. That tiny bit, and then I must remember to do over the porchway. I'm going to go back to my raw sienna and put that in. And same thing, I'm going to put a little bit of shading under here. Under here. And any more shading detail I'm going to put on in a second layer. Just want a tiny bit at the moment. Got plenty of time to put more on when that's dry. I'm actually going to do a little bit of lifting. The front of this is very light, so I've washed and dried my brush, make it very thirsty. And I'm just going to lift a little bit from the front here where it's light. Maybe just the top of the roof's dry now. That's good. And that when we put a bit more dark underneath, it'll have a nice contrast there, because we're not going to put any color on the white cottage apart from the shadow under the roof. It's going to just stay white. I deliberately looked for white buildings and white cottages so that we could do that. We could just leave that lovely pristine white paper. Right, I think a couple of you are definitely done your roof. Let's mix up the grey for the path. Pretty simple grey. I'm gonna just move that out the way. I'm gonna use what I've got here. I've got the start of a grey here with the burnt sienna and the ultramarine blue. So we're going to just put a little bit of Payne's grey into that. Tiny bit of Payne's grey into it. We don't want much. We wanted quite a watery grey, and then a little bit of either burnt umber or burnt sienna. You can use either one. Need a bit more grey. A little bit more grey. I want it grey rather than brown, the path. Add a bit more grey. I'm just going until I get a nice grey, and then I'm going to add a bit of water. I don't want it too dark. I'm going to try it out. That's a bit too dark. I'm going to add a bit more water. Try it out again. Because some of the path is almost white. So it needs to be fairly watery. And you can actually lighten it up by putting water on the actual path to lighten it up a little bit. You could even add, if you want, when you're doing the path, a little bit of your yellow ochre to warm up your flagstones. It depends how, how much you want to play. It's just this path here. And I think I just went straight in with light grey and then some little bit of dark grey. But I'm going to maybe do a little bit of playing around with adding a little bit of the raw sienna today, just for fun. Let's move these back a bit. Our path. So what I mean is, if I wanted to do that and experiment with putting a little bit of raw sienna, I'm going to just wet a bit of the path and add a very diluted raw sienna to that. You don't have to do this. This is me just playing. And then I'm going to take my very, very diluted grey that I just made with some Payne's Grey and some burnt umber in mine. You can also use burnt sienna and ultramarine blue, or burnt sienna and cobalt blue. They will make a lovely grey as well. And I'm just going to let those colours mix wet in wet. And later when they're dry, actually the edging of this grass is some grey stones. So I'm going to put those into with the grey. And when this is dry, I'm going to come back with just a little bit more grey in the shaded areas. Now I'm looking around to see if I need any more grey. This little plant pot here is, I'm going to add even more water to the grey. It's very, very light grey. It's a light grey stone. I'm going to add even more water to it. I'm actually going to add maybe a little bit of cobalt blue to it just to cool the grey down. More water, a little bit of cobalt blue. And I'm going to paint this little stone planter here. Very, very, very light grey. Now while this is wet, I might just add a little bit of dark going into the porchway there, and a little bit back here. Just adding a little bit of dark grey wet and wet, but I'm going to put some on when it's dry too. There was a lavender growing all the way down the edge of the grass, but I just thought that was if you want to put lavender all the way down the edge, great, do it. I just thought it was a bit too much fiddly detail. We've got quite a lot of fiddly details, so I thought that was overdoing it a little bit. But if you love fiddly detail, put in the lavender. You can even put the lavender lilac color on the tops. I think in this one I just really suggested it. I didn't do much detail. The bigger you go with your paper, the more detail you can put in there. Now we have just a little bit of chimney and windowsill in that kind of light red or burnt sienna color. You can use either one. You can either use light red, which looks more red on my camera than it is. It's sort of that terracotta color. Or you can make your own terracotta color with burnt sienna and a tiny bit of red, cadmium red or something like that. So burnt sienna with a little touch of cadmium red or a different red, bright red, with your burnt sienna kind of makes that terracotta color. Or you can use the light red paint, but it was just a small detail. There's the chimney. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of burnt umber to mine, just to make it a little bit more brown. And by now your sky should be completely dry, so popping the chimney in should be fine. If your roof is still wet, give it a little bit of a quick dry with the hairdryer. Otherwise your chimney's going to bleed into your roof. But it should be dry. Mine's dry. So I'm just popping in that brick chimney. Suck a little bit of the colour up. And there's also a sort of a brick windowsill here. Probably the other windows have got them, but we can't see the other windows because of the hanging baskets. I'm just going to pop that in. And I think I'm going to make the planter at the end here is just sort of a dull stone color. Well, I'm going to use this terracotta color for this little planter back here. Just so I've got some echoes of the same color, and it's easy. I've got that color mixed up already. I don't have to think about it. There's another little planter here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to add a little bit of blue to that to make it a little bit more grey. And I'm going to pop this little planter in here. I think they're all like faded wood or stone planters, but I'm just going to take a little bit of a liberty with them. When the chimney's dry, we can put a little bit of shadow on there as well. So I've kept my greens handy. They've got a bit dry, but I still have them handy. I'll pop them close to where we're painting. And I will reconstitute them with a bit of water and a bit more paint. Remembering that the top of that shrub, let's bring that over here a little bit. The top of that shrub is very, very, very bright green. So I'm going to use you can use the brightest yellow you have, which is my Indian yellow or your Azo Yellow or Cadmium Yellow. I'm going to add just a little bit of Phthalo Green, just a very small amount to make that really, really bright acidic green. Now, as we come down that shrub, it does get a little bit darker. So same thing, I'm going to have that Indian yellow, or you can use whatever your brightest yellow is. And I will add a little bit of cobalt blue to it. Oops, that was way too much cobalt blue. It came right off of there in a big clump. So got too much. So I'm going to add some more yellow to it. And for the dark green at the bottom, where it gets much darker, I'm going to have my Ultramarine Blue with a little bit of Azo Yellow or Indian Yellow. And just try the Azo Yellow and the Ultramarine. So I've got three different greens. I've got bright yellow with some phthalo green at the top of it, going to a mid green, which was the bright yellow with a little bit of cobalt, and then I have ultramarine with some bright yellow, but mostly ultramarine for the bottom of the bush. And then I can come back and use this one for the dark ivy when I put the dark ivy in, and for some of the other greenery that we have in the hanging baskets and shrubbery. So I'll let you mix up your greens. I'll get my painting back here. So I'm going to start at the top. I've got the very lightest, brightest yellowy green, and I'm starting at the top of that bush, and I've left a bit of space where it goes into the sky. This time I don't think I remembered to last time, but so I'm putting my yellowy green at the top here. Now remember, I forgot to leave the edge of the house white, so I'm actually trying to remember to leave a little bit of white at the edge of the house. Now that light green is going to come up over the ivy, so well, I'm still in the light green because I want to have the dark ivy behind it. I'm coming up over the where the ivy is going to be. Being very, very splodgy with my brush. As I get to the side of the paper, I can just fill in with just green, no shapes, no leaf shapes. And now I'm coming down the bush. I'm going to go into my medium green as I come down here. And just let that blend wet and wet with the greens that I've put on there. If you look at the photograph, you can see that the edge here is a little bit darker. I'm going back to my light green because I want to make sure that everything that comes over the ivy is going to show up nice and light. And then back to my mid green. And then I'm going to go into my dark green. Because where this comes over the light grass, it's much darker than the grass. And where it's at the side, here, where I'm just going to fill it in, it's much darker. I know it looks messy when I put it down. I'm going back in now. I've got my lightest green, and I'm letting that flow back into the dark green. Taking my mid green for a little bit of definition. And the wet and wet is what really gives you the sense that you have some depth to this. You know, you've got leaves sticking out and leaves, branches behind that. And we don't need to be too detailed. If you get finished and you think that looks a bit too messy, just use your pen and put in some extra details with your pen. Going into my mid green just for a little bit more definition in here. And then just let the whole thing do its wet and wet thing. Maybe a little bit more shadow up here. You can see where at the side just going to pull back a little bit so you can see how it looks sort of wet in wet. I'm going to put a little bit more light green up top here. I'll fill that in a little bit. Now we can use these greens, still use them, or you can mix a little bit more of them. We especially want to put, we're going to do the same thing here with this bush over here, just to the left of the porch. We're going to put some mid green on the top, working wet in wet. We're going to put some dark green on the bottom so that we have a wet in wet blend. Now for my mid green, I use the Quinacridone Gold mixed with the Ultramarine Blue. It's just a slightly different green to the photo, just because it's rather a beautiful color. You can use any mid green and dark green that you want. You just need that definition between light and dark. That's all you're going for. So I'm going to put I have the Quinacridone Gold mixed with the Ultramarine Blue for my mid green at the top. Just going to pop that in over here. I need a little bit more Quinacridone Gold and a little bit more water with it. Again, I'm using those sort of bubbly brush strokes. I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit more. And you'll notice I'm not like paint by number filling in where my black lines are. I'm going over them, behind them, around them. They don't have to be exactly in the lines. I kind of like it when they're not. Now I'm going into my dark green, and before that's dry, I want to put the dark green in. And this is going to come right down. And sort of it goes around the porch here. Now I think underneath I need to do a little bit of stonework under there. I'll leave that. I'm just taking a little bit of my light green just around the edge there. And if I feel like there's too much dark, I'm using my thirsty brush to just pick up a little bit of the color in the middle. And I'm looking at my ivy here and the ivy on the photo, and they've trimmed it quite nicely. So as they've trimmed it, there's sort of an edge to it that's darker. I'm just going to put that edge in. With as my dark and my mid green mixed together. So what you're really going for is you got a lot of green in this photo. You want to make sure that the greens are very, very different, and even more different than the photo, so that our painting sort of sings a little bit. Now we're going to fill in all of the green that you can see with your different greens. The bush here, which is either a rose or peony, I'm not sure which one. That's kind of a very mid green. I'm going to get my smaller brush, my number 2, and get my mid green that's just a bright yellow, and mine's cobalt and bright yellow, my mid green. And I will put the greenery in on this around those flowers that we put on there. Again, as you come to the front of that bush, it's a lot brighter. So I'm going to add a little bit more yellow in there. And then back to the mid green. I'm going to add a tiny bit of phthalo green into that, because it's quite a bright green. That was just a little bit of phthalo green. Don't go wild with phthalo green because it's very strong. But it gives it that lovely bright green of a summer shrub. And similarly, the shrubs behind this one here, I'm going to add a little bit of ultramarine to that because they're slightly bluer. I'm putting these in back here. It helps sometimes if you just put some little dots around the edges, you know, for those little leaves that you can barely see. You know, on the edge of this one, there's sort of leaves sticking out. And as you get deeper down into the bottom of these shrubs, you can go into your much darker green. Mine looks so sort of unfocused when I zoom in that much. Let's zoom out a little bit. I'm going to add just a tiny bit of burnt umber to my green, because as you get further away over to your left, everything gets a bit darker. You can't see the color as much. So for this green back here, I added just a little bit of burnt umber to my dark green to darken it up. I'll show you what it looks like in the tray. See, I have my dark green here, add a little bit of burnt umber, because back here is very dark. And that's going to make the red stand up more, having that dark green behind it. Like I said, there was a very light green little shrub sticking out there, so do that in a moment. It's not bright green though, so I'm going to add a little bit of water and a little bit of cobalt blue so that it's lighter and bluer. And I'm going back to my medium green for most of the other greens around the plant pots and the hanging baskets. Anytime your green looks too bright, you can either add some blue or you can add some brown to darken it up a little bit. Now I'm just going to add some green around the flowers in the hanging baskets, and there's some trailing green coming down from them. Again, just little curly strokes. Little dots and little curly strokes. And they don't fuss too much with them, because the more you fuss, the more detail you put in, the weirder it will tend to look. Too much detail. Like I said, some little dots sometimes at the top. Actually, the green goes up behind this thatch here. Goes up to the edge of it. I can see that. And the light dots at the top. Don't forget the little planters. Oh, this is a little bit like doing all the little flowers at the bee's knees yesterday. Not yesterday, last week. And once this shrub here is dried, I'm going to go back in with a little bit more dark green to put some shadows under some of these leaves. And also there's a little bit of shadow under the bush here. So I put some Ultramarine Blue in with my green. And just added a bit of shadow under the bush and along the edge of the building. Well, let's look at some of the other hanging baskets. Let's get some more. As they're closer to you, over here, you can add a little bit more yellow to your green, because everything gets a little bit warmer as it comes closer. So I added just a little bit more yellow in there. This one had a lot of white flowers hanging down, but I've filled a lot of it in with green. It's very hard to just leave that much white in such a small painting. Little bit between the flowers. And we've got some down here. Oh, and there's a little bit of ivy growing up the wall, or something growing up the wall here. At the back of this planter, I'm using my much darker green, the one that has a bit of brown in it, because at the back of this planter is quite shaded. I'm adding a bit of blue to it as well. I've got most of my, let's check, I've got most of my planters in. The one thing I did add to mine was these flowers in the foreground, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of greenery on those. Again, a more yellowy green because they're close. So I want some stems and some leaves. a bit darker in underneath them. Very, very loose. And I'm looking for my grey over there. Now I have some, there's some like a stone border under here. I'm going to grab some of my grey. If your plants are dry, I'm going to just put that stone border in behind there. I can always do a bit more detail with my pen on that. The other thing, still got my grey there. Big brush, and I'm going to just now put that in. I'm just going to add a little bit more shadow now, just a wet brush. A bit more shadow in that path as it goes away from you. Just a little bit more color. Second wash of that grey that we made. It's just, it was the burnt umber with a little bit of Payne's grey, and the other place I'm going to do some little vertical strokes on the bricks that are at the edge of this lawn. With just that slightly darker second layer of grey. Just to give that sense that the path is going away from you and the path is going in under the porch, a little bit darker in there. And then these little stones. You can use your pen to do the flag, you know, the stones if you want to, or you can use your brush, totally up to you. So we've got one more big piece of green to put in. By now, if you've done all of these, and I'll give you a few more minutes to do all of these, the last green you're going to put in is this dark green ivy behind this light green. So we've been doing all of these, hoping that this light green is going to be dry enough to do that. So I'm going to mix up another batch of the nice dark green, ready to just fill in this ivy. And I do want the top to be a bit lighter. So I'll put that in first. And I'm remembering that just down the side here, I can see a little bit of the white building. They have trimmed the ivy quite nicely, or whatever's growing up there. Boxwood or whatever they've got growing. So when you fill in all your baskets and so forth, I'm gonna just lighten up this shadow just a little bit on the edge, just a little bit harsh. I'm using my wet brush. Just lighten it up a little bit. I got a bit too much. I think I got a bit too much ultramarine blue in there. Let's take it down a notch. Oh, so water over everything. Right, so let's mix up a bit more dark green for the ivy. Move that out the way. I'm lobbing paint all over the place. Now let's take some Azo Yellow this time, not quite so bright. And we want some of the lighter green at one end. And Ultramarine Blue. Little tiny bit of Phthalo Green, just a little tiny bit. Ultramarine Blue, and I'm going to meet in the middle here. And I'm going to add to that a little bit of here, burnt umber. Now you can mix a lot of things to make it darker. Cadmium red's also a good one. Cadmium red is the complement of your green. So if you add a little bit of cadmium red, which is what I'm doing now, just to show you, a little bit of cadmium red will have the same effect of darkening it as the burnt umber will. Or light red, just depends on, you know, what you want to achieve. Ultramarine's lovely for making a nice dark green. So you'll notice I don't have just one green on my palette. I've got a lot I can dip into here, and if I dip my brush into several places, I can mix actually on my brush if I've got that amount of green on my palette. Again, using ultramarine and yellow for the mid green. I have all that ready for the ivy. I get my painting back here. Now the top of the ivy in the photo is much lighter. So before I do the dark, I want to use that much more yellow green that I made. I want to put that in at the top before I go into the dark green. I've made the top of mine not quite as neat as theirs is, mostly because theirs is trimmed in a very kind of a straight line, and that's not going to look really natural in a painting. It's going to look as if you've artificially done a straight line where you didn't need one. So now I've got my light in. Before that's too dry, I want to go in with a more mid-green, so that light green with a bit of the dark green mixed in. And I especially, as I'm going to go behind these light leaves carefully, I want to cut in with my dark green so that they show up. Now, if you're always doing like bubbly strokes with your brush, you're always going to get nice natural edges. And I want the light green again, as at the edge of the window here, it's much lighter. So I'm going to come in, it actually goes across over the window here. Again, have little bits sticking out so you don't have a straight edge, even if it looks really straight. And then I'm going to go back into the dark. So that the light green shows up. And you have to be a little bit more careful around the, you know, the light green leaves, cutting in a little bit more carefully. I'm in, my brush is too big. I need to be in my zero for some of that. So I'm just carefully with my zero brush doing some of the cutting in, and remembering like bubble over here so that you don't get your paint drying too much, so that when you come in you have a, that's why I'm going back and forth. I don't want to have a dry line where one paint's drying too quickly. I need to get a lot of this in. And I'm going to my really, really dark green now, the one that's got a little bit of red and a little bit of brown in it. Put a little bit of lighter green in. We're going to come right down to the edge of the building here. Going in with a little bit more definition up here. And then back to my tiny brush so that I can get in between these light coloured leaves. And what you might want to do while you have the dark on your brush, on your little tiny brush if you have one, is I'm just going to put in a few of those dark stems on the bush over there. So really essentially what we're doing now is a negative painting. You've got your light colour on and then you're going in with a negative paint behind it. And so that it doesn't look too strange, you can continue that negative painting over and under the edge of the bush here, like doing the same thing, going just a little bit behind the leaves and putting in the stems, adding a little bit of dark detail. And wet brush sometimes just to blend stuff in a little bit. Thirsty brush to lift stuff off a little bit. And when this is all dry, if you feel that, like I feel that my light green and dark green have got a bit too much white in, when it's really, really dry, I can go back with a very light green and just fill that in. It won't even notice if I do that, and just like have a quick wash of light green over that greenery there, and it will connect it all together and it won't look so bitty. And you might feel like you want a little bit more dark green in some of places, or mid green. So let's pull back a little bit. And we just have the dark shadows to do, the dark windows, the dark porchway. Not very much left to do, just your dark details. Also, like the edges of the windows, Cobalt Blue is a nice one for those kind of shadows. So let's have a look at the windows. How are we doing? I think I need some clean water. I won't be a sec. It's right here. I already have some here, so I'm just going to wet it up. And we don't want too much, just a little bit. Tiny, tiny little brush. So what I mean is the inside of the building as you come into the window. Here, it's actually sort of grey in the, put a little bit of cobalt on the window. I'm going to come back with some Payne's grey. It's actually very grey in the photo. I'm using some Cobalt Blue. We'll come back with Payne's grey and darken everything up. So can you see what I mean? Just inside the building here. Just putting that in. And I'm going to mix a little tiny bit of Payne's Grey with that. What did I say for the shadows? I just want to check my notes. Yeah, Cobalt Blue and Payne's Grey, that's what I said. So I'm going to add a little bit of Payne's Grey to that. We don't want it too strong. And I'm just going to put a little bit of shadow under the hanging baskets. If you have it too strong, it's going to be too dark. And add a little bit more water to it. The shadows are not, it wasn't a very bright sunny day, so the shadows are not that discernible. But this is a very, very watery mix. I'm just literally just blobbing on a little bit of that blue-grey shadow behind all of those plants. And there is shadow from the roof, but I want to get the windows in before we do that shadow on the roof, because otherwise it's going to bleed a lot. So for the, we need some much stronger mix. So same thing, same colours, the Cobalt Blue and the Payne's Grey, but we need to go a lot stronger now. Let's get my bigger brush and start with the Payne's Grey. This is what I mean by stronger. We're going much darker now. Bit of Cobalt Blue, less water, more pigment, get it nice and dark. And we're going to do the insides of the windows, the window frames. I'm going to take some Payne's Grey and add a little bit of just trying to decide whether to add Cadmium Red to it or sepia. And maybe I'll just do both. I want to get it a little bit darker, a little bit of sepia to it. Or even, you know what else I've got? I have, I forgot that I had indigo as well. Just trying to get nice and dark for the window frames. And add a little bit of indigo as well. A little bit of sepia. Just want to make it a little bit darker. There we go. I got a really, not much water with that one. And then this is for the insides of the windows. Little tiny brush. We want my 0 brush. And we're going to do the insides of the windows. So I'm going to get the lighter of the two, the Cobalt and the Payne's Grey. And very, very dark inside of here. The actual building is painted black as it comes into the window. And I'm going to put that mix on. Now I'm going to lift a little bit off, but I have the blue underneath. So when I do a little bit of lifting, you'll just see the blue underneath. So I'm just thirsty brush, just lifting a tiny bit of that dark colour off. And then the second window, because they haven't cut out the roof here, you don't see the arch under the thatch. The window's behind the thatch. So again, I'm going to put the dark on, clean my brush, dry my brush, and just lift Just lift a little bit. I always lift on a diagonal to get that kind of reflection in the glass, so it's not too sort of kind of like just thick. Now this one has a black casing around the window, so I'm going to leave that for the moment. Remember, I put a little bit of yellow on there, bright yellow. So I'm going to just dig into that a little bit. And I'll put the dark frame on in a moment with that darker one. And again, just lift a little bit of light out of there. And I'll show you where the black frame, there's a black frame from the house goes along here and under here like this. It's a great big piece of oak that's painted black that goes along there like that. And I think it's painted right up here on the inside. I'm doing that first just so you can see what I'm talking about here. It kind of goes underneath. I came around with this one too here. So it comes around there. Actually, it comes around closer to the bottom of the thatch. I should come down a little bit more. And then I'm going to the window color. Remember to come around your flowers carefully. And then I'm again going to lift a little bit of reflection with my thirsty brush. Now I've done those first because I can do the shadow under the roof when those have dried a little bit, and I also need to do the second one's dried enough that I can come in with the black window casing here. This is the darker mix that I made, adding the sepia and the red. Or you can use black. It's such a small part that black will be fine. This one's also got a window frame. We can't really see that too well. There's a wood frame across the top of these two windows down here. I put those in before the windows. I'll put the third one in too. The third one is here. I'll put those in first. I'm dragging my brush, kind of lay it flat on the paper and drag it sideways. That way you can get a fairly good straight line. And I will put the window casing in this one while I'm here with the black mix that I made, or you can just use black. All right, I'm going back in with the not quite as dark one. And putting that dark window color. And I'm not going to do any lifting on this one. It's really, really in the shade. You can't see anything. Same for this one, really in the shade. Can't see much. And then coming along to this one again, we have a little bit of that light in there, and we have some drapes. And I'm going to again lift the drapes out when I'm done the dark part. Pull that down into the flowers, go around the flowers, go around the ivy or the bushes. So at the top of the window there's some drape showing, so I'm just going to lift. They're kind of like those balloon drapes. And lift that out with a thirsty brush. Oh, got a big drip of water on there. And maybe just a little bit of reflection on the window, tiny bit. And sometimes it dries really, really, really light, much lighter than you hoped. So you can always go back and put a little bit more dark in if you want a little bit more dark in the windows. There's also there's like a little plaque on the wall and like a little thing here. Pop those on. So it's starting to look very different now. We've got those in. There's one other place I almost forgot about. One slightly bigger brush. Go with my number 6. Running out of black paint now. Quickly mix a little bit more up. At the bottom of the cottage, along here, it's black too. I'm just popping that in. Very little left to do now. We have just the porch and the shadow under the roof. That's all we have left to do. So I'm going to mix my porch colour up, which is burnt umber and ultramarine blue, heavy on the brown this time, or burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. It doesn't matter which brown you use. It'll give you the same effect. That's why I've only ever bought one brown, because you can get the same color with either one. So it's going to be more brown in the porchway. I want one part of the porchway to be a lighter brown and one be a bit darker, so I'm keeping my burnt umber over here and then a little bit more ultramarine blue over here. So we've got 2 different browns for the porchway. So let's use just the brown by itself for the uprights here. Sorry, I'm going to take a drink of water. Got a tickle. That's better. Right. Yeah, uprights. It's actually probably grey the bottom bit. Still got a tickle. I'm going to do a little bit of brown around these rocks here too. And this side. I'm also going to use the dark color I made here. That's got more blue. I'm going to put a little bit of shadow on the thatch. Add a little bit of water. Just shading that thatch in a little bit. And then I'm going into my darker blue-brown color for inside the porch. The detail inside there you can do with your pen or with another layer of paint. You can't really see much. It's all in shadow. And at the bottom, it's fairly grey. Actually going to mix a little bit of burnt umber with the grey just down here. I'm taking a bit more grey and adding just a bit more shadow in here. It looks very strong when it's wet, but as it starts to dry, you'll notice it'll be way less strong. Now, if you like, you can, at this point, if you want to, you can add more shadow to the thatch, like coming down in the direction of the thatch. A little bit of directional brushwork, and then a wet brush just to blend it in a little bit. It just gives it a more thatchy sort of a look. A few lines on there. I'm going to add a little bit more shading to the porch. Like I said, it is drying much lighter. And with my tiny brush again, I'm adding little tiny thatch details. And a little bit more shadow under this area. Now when it's dry, I'll probably come back with a little bit more shading, a little bit more detail. It's a bit wet to do that right now. Let me pull back a little bit. So once you've got that in, pretty much, oh, I haven't put the black, I forgot one of the black window frames up here, which I wanted to actually have done before I put the shadow on up there. And the same thing, the thatch that comes up here, I didn't put that in when the windows were wet, but the thatch is in shade as it goes in under the window there. I'm just putting that shadow on that. The other place that the thatch has shade, you can do it with your pen or with your brush, is this area up here. I'm getting into wet paint territory now, I have to be a bit careful. So this is just my brown that I made for the porch. The Ultramarine Blue with the burnt umber or burnt sienna, one or the other. Now my paint's a little bit wet to do this, but the same thing, you can take a little bit of that color and you can do some direction, a bit more direction to your thatch if you want, or if you just like it how it is. I like to sort of blend it in with a wet brush a little bit. If you just like it how it is, just leave it. It does have, in the picture, it has a little bit of green on the thatch over here, which I think is kind of nice because it actually blends it in with the bushes a little bit. So I'm just taking a bit of very watery green, very watery, and just wet brush, just adding a little bit to the edge. And these little details, like adding a little bit of detail to the thatch, you can wait till everything is really dry and do that. I think I did it originally with a dry brush. So you know, a dry brush is where you get lots of paint on quite a big brush, and you take most of the paint off on your towel, and you check it to see if it's dry yet, and then you kind of drag it down your roof. And I don't want to do too much. I'll lose that, you know, that beautiful roof color. So just a little bit with a dry brush. That's really enough. The edges of the roof are a little darker. I'm going to use my number 8 brush for my final shadow. So the final shadow is just straight along under the roof. Remember the very first week we did the pitting host doors, and we just put that shadow along. So same thing, we're going to use the cobalt and the Payne's grey. I'm going to mix a new one because these are all too dark. The cobalt with a little bit of Payne's grey, just a kind of a grey blue color. Water. Don't want it. We don't want it too dark. I want to test it. Maybe a little bit more Payne's grey. Test it. Now I've gone a bit too grey now. A bit more blue. Water. And let's see what we got. So we want a very, very watery blue grey color. I'm going to add a little bit more blue again. I took too much out. Add a bit more water. That's good enough. We don't want it too dark. And a big brush so that you don't fiddle. If you've got a nice point on your big brush, that is. And then we're going to drag that brush along the roof edge like that. Just in one brush stroke. I just want the edge of the thatch a bit darker. And you can also use that colour for your shadows behind a bit of shadow here under this roof. Under the porch roof here. If at any time you need a bit more shadow anywhere, like the windows need a little bit more, just use that color. So it's the cobalt blue with a little bit of the Payne's grey, a lot of water, and that's why we did the windows up here first, so they had a chance to dry. You just drag it right through everything. This is also good for just inside the porch, just to give it a bit more shade. And maybe under here a little bit, side of the plant pot. And I think edge of the garden, maybe edge of the wall. And you see all of this is dried much lighter here, so I can actually add a little bit more dark now it's dry, just a little bit more. And I think we're pretty much done. Did I miss anything? I mean, there's where's my little brush? Just around the chimney pot, there's a shadow. Get my little tiny brush. Just around here, it's kind of a bit darker. I'm sure I've missed something. It feels like I've missed something. I can take that really light green. Remember I said if your bushes and these don't have too much white in them, I've got that really light green, and I'm just going to connect them a little bit more. Just washing over the whole thing with a bit of light green. And that just connects everything a little bit more than it was. You can always add a little bit of that light green to places if you feel like you need a little bit more. If your grass didn't look bright enough, if you felt you wanted a bit more brightness to your grass or depth to your grass, you can always add a bit more green if it feels a bit wishy-washy. A little bit more here. Wet brush to just spread it out. And I think, pretty sure that's everything. I think we're done. Maybe I should just take the, I always love to take the tape off to see the clean edge. It's always very satisfying, I think. Get rid of the mess on the edge of the tape. And there we go. Smugglers Cottage.
Thank you for joining me again for this series. I'll see you again. I'm going to add some pictures of the interior of this beautiful cottage, and you can skip through them, pause, finish the video if you're not interested, but it was so very beautiful inside. So thank you for joining me. Take care, everybody. Keep painting. Bye for now.